going to look at a few of my own pieces and see how they relate to the rule of thirds. I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, I want to show you how to analyse artwork using the rule of thirds. I want you to see the rule of thirds in action and discover its strengths. Then I want you to include it in your own artwork and create something amazing. Secondly, I'm analysing my work because I'm an artist. This task improves my artistic development. There isn't a stage when suddenly you don't have to analyse your own work. There is always something to learn. You will become a better artist if you frequently examine your own artwork. This piece clearly conforms to the rule of thirds. Take a moment to visualise the grid in your mind. I'll now place the grid on top. Is it where you thought it would be? I will now analyse this piece. The trunk of the tree is almost directly on the left vertical line. A significant point of interest is the fire on the tree, and this is highlighted because its position is where the top horizontal and left vertical lines intersect. The man is positioned next to the right vertical line. He could be closer and it might have improved the composition, but the theme of the painting is regret, so I wanted some distance between the man and the fire in order to convey the feeling of regret as a visual. I could have chosen a landscape canvas as opposed to a square one. This would have let me place the man on the right vertical line while also creating distance between the man and the tree. From analysing this painting, I've learnt that I need to think more about the canvas I'm using and how the shape relates to the meaning of the piece. Overall, I'm pleased with the composition, and I see this piece as being successful. This analysis will help me create better artwork in the future. Can you see the rule of thirds in the structure of this painting? Take a moment to consider this painting yourself. If it helps, pause the video and write down some ideas or anything that you've noticed about the composition. I'll now place the grid on top and I'll analyse the piece. There are no significant elements placed in the areas where the lines intersect. The colours and shapes can be found in other areas of the canvas. The abstract shadow within the eye stops at the left line of the grid, and it highlights the change from white to abstract. That is a clear way that the rule of thirds could be seen in this image, although it may seem as though the composition tool is barely present. However, if I show the grid and then distort it, you might begin to see the shape of an eye taking form. I'll now place this grid above the painting. This is a fairly realistic depiction of an eye, despite having some abstract elements. Perhaps the grid needed to be abstracted to avoid distorting the shape of the eye. In this composition, I can see the grid in operation. It might not be how the rule of thirds is often used, but we need to think beyond the usual constraints. In using the rule of thirds as a tool to analyse a painting, we can stretch the concept and give it the space to evolve. Take a moment to imagine the grid on top of this image and consider the composition of this piece. If you become used to visualizing the grid, then you will find it easier to analyze paintings when they're in galleries and museums. On those occasions, you'll be surrounded by inspiration and excitement, so it's the perfect place to consider a piece more closely. Now we have the grid. In this image, I can clearly see the rule of thirds in action. The large circle on the left side is placed on the left vertical line, and the smaller circle is placed where the lines intersect. There is a green abstract shape beneath it, and it almost seems to point at that little green circle, adding greater emphasis. Part of the black spiral circles to the place where the left vertical and upper horizontal lines intersect. This is the most dominant part of this image. Elsewhere in the image, a curvy line rests on the bottom horizontal line. If we gaze at the right vertical line, we can see that two vertical lines of green and dark pink rest behind the curvy lines that are at the front of the image. This effect implies layers and depth. We imagine those lines are unbroken and instead presume depth to the image. We see some lines as being at the front and some lines as being at the back. This is an effect I will want to use in later works. Take a moment to imagine the grid on top of this image. Does the piece have a good composition? When I place the grid on top of this image, it becomes immediately clear that it doesn't use the rule of thirds. In this surreal image, the floor is sky, and where the sky usually is, the earth has occupied that position. This is a surreal image, not a realistic image. Rules can be broken. The rule of thirds would suggest that the skyline is placed on either the bottom horizontal line or the top horizontal line. This image breaks that rule. Also, there is nothing significant where the lines intersect. This image doesn't use the rule of thirds. It's important to remember that the rule of thirds is a guide. All rules can be bent or broken, but you must understand a rule before you ignore it. This image has great composition. It balances colour and structure, yet it doesn't conform to the rule of thirds. Using the rule of thirds to analyse a painting won't always give you clear answers about whether a composition is good or bad. You have to develop your own aesthetic ideas. Sometimes it's just a matter of taste. What looks good to you?